webinar. So it's great to see so many people who found the energy, and really a testament, I think, to how important this topic really is. My name is Sharon Beit-Elachmi. I am the CEO and founder of Belev Shalem, care management services for seniors in Israel. As care managers, we coordinate the full spectrum of care for seniors in Israel that they need to age at home. That includes coordinating healthcare, housing, home care, social opportunities, maximizing benefits, and financial and legal planning. So we really make it our business to work with the best possible providers of services, which is my segue into introducing Miriam Shatsky. We work very closely with Miriam to provide all of our clients with legal tools they need to plan for aging. And since you're really here to hear her and not me, I will go ahead and turn it over. Just a couple of notes about questions. We've set up this presentation so that there will be a few questions that I'll be presenting throughout the seminar. Those questions were really based on real life situations that we come across as care managers almost every day. And there'll also be some time for question and answers at the end. You'll see a little Q&A box that you can type your questions to me, and I will go ahead and we'll get all those answered at the end. So now, really, without further ado, Miriam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for having me here on this webinar, and thank you to everybody who has joined us. Now, I am a lawyer, so I'm going to start off with a disclaimer that this is not legal advice specific to the participants. This is general information. I want to give you some tools, make you aware of what's out there. Sometimes the things I say might be a little bit more generalized, because for the sake of simplicity, I don't want to inundate you with details, and I want the message to get across very clearly. So, powers of attorney in times of crisis. We never know when a crisis might come, where it'll strike us, what circumstances we will be in. So there's no possible way to be prepared for every possible scenario, but there are a lot of things that we can do to help ourselves and help our family members when it does happen. And that's really what we are here to do today, specifically the tools of different powers of attorney. Now, we're going to touch upon 3 types of powers of attorney today. One is a general notarized power of attorney. The other is an enduring power of attorney. And the third is a power of attorney for end-of-life decisions. But as Sharon had said, we're going to present these through different kinds of scenarios as examples, because I don't want this to just be dry theory, right? That goes in one ear, out the other. This isn't a law lecture, okay? It's here to provide you with actual tools. That's really what these legal documents are. They're tools. So when we want to know what tool we need to look at the situation and look at what it is we want to accomplish, and then see what might be the right tool for that situation. So we're going to jump right in here. Sharon, do you want to present this scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. Scenario 1 is, since the corona crisis, my mother doesn't leave the house unless she absolutely must. How can we take care of things for her, such as going to the bank, going to government offices, etc.?
Okay, so this type of scenario is really, we're talking about someone who could theoretically handle her own affairs. She's completely competent, she's able to do it, but at the point in time that she's in her circumstances, she's choosing not to, or she would prefer not to. One of the very useful tools in this type of situation would be a general power of attorney, which is also a notarized power of attorney. It's a fairly easy to do process and not very costly, and it can be very handy. When is it useful? It's useful in the scenario that was presented, right? Someone who is choosing not to leave the house or has a physical limitation that makes it difficult to leave the house for different reasons. It could be useful in happier circumstances, such as an extended absence from the country. Let's say you are going abroad for a while and you want someone to take care of your car and renew the insurance on that and take it for the annual test, or you have an apartment and you really want someone to take care of renting it out. It could be very useful for things like that. Sometimes you're here, you're capable, but you're busy, you don't feel like dealing with it. You can give someone else power of attorney to handle those things for you. So while this is a very wide document, it also does have some limitations. The first limitation is that it's limited to financial and administrative things. This is not a personal or a medical power of attorney. It can only touch upon financial issues. As we said, it could be a very broad document, right? Because it's a general power of attorney. You're giving them general rights to do a lot of things in your name and handle your assets, your property and everything. That carries a risk, right? The more power we give someone else over our assets, there's always a risk of abuse or being used in the way that we did not mean for it to be used. Another limitation is that this type of power of attorney is good for 10 years and then it expires. And more importantly, it expires upon loss of cognitive competence. So when in the scenario, when the mom is in the house and she's choosing not to leave, but she's perfectly capable of making her own decisions, this tool is just fine. But at the point in which she can no longer make her own decisions, then this tool is not what you need. Now, before we go on to the next scenario, I want to touch upon bank accounts, because you could take that general notarized power of attorney to the bank, right? Say maybe the mom gives a power of attorney to her daughter, and then her daughter goes to the bank and says, look, I have power of attorney from my mom. I want to do ABC in her bank account. But there's actually an easier and simpler way to do it is if the mom would just take the daughter to the bank and add her there to the account. And there's two ways to do that. And I want to make sure you guys are aware of the differences between them, okay? One would be that the mom adds the daughter, like in this case, as a joint owner, okay? Meaning the daughter is adding on as a full owner of the account. And this carries a certain risk because it can be seen as the mom intending to share the money in the account with her daughter, when really the intention is just to allow the daughter to act in the account on the mom's behalf. So that's a certain risk when you add someone as a joint owner. And it also carries a risk of exposure to the daughter's creditors, or if perhaps she ends up separating from her spouse or going through a divorce, they can make claims to the money in the account as well, saying it was the daughter's money, not just the mom's money. So I would suggest that if the mom wanted to add someone to her account, she would do it as a morshe chatima, give her signatory rights. It's not ownership. She's just adding someone like power of attorney who can act on her behalf, okay? But this too expires upon loss of cognitive competence. So these tools are very useful for a certain scenario, for a certain time circumstances in the mom's life. Let's move on to scenario 2.
Thanks. Scenario 2, how do I make sure that someone I trust will make important decisions for me if I temporarily cannot make my own decisions or if I develop dementia?
Okay. This question, had it been asked a few years ago, I would not have a great answer to give you. Basically, I would say that if you reach the point that you suffered from dementia and couldn't make your own decisions, then someone, usually someone in your family, would run to the family court and ask to be appointed as legal guardian. And at that point, you didn't really have that much say over who is getting appointed and what exactly they're getting appointed for and what it is that you wanted them to do, because it's too late. In 2017, there was a new law, rather an amendment to the law that introduced the concept of enduring power of attorney, in Hebrew, yipuy koach mitmashech, also known as ongoing power of attorney, but it's all the same thing. And what is this document and what does it do? It's meant to replace the need for a legal guardian and replace the need for having to run to court to appoint someone. So what this type of power of attorney is, it's exactly the type of power of attorney that kicks in when the other ones we talked about, like a general notarized power of attorney, would expire. It kicks in when a person can no longer make their own decisions. Now, what's great about this tool is that it can cover medical, financial, and personal issues. Medical, I think we understand what that means, is very straightforward. If someone needs to give consent for a procedure, for example, then their agent, whoever they appointed in the power of attorney, can give that consent. Financial, handling their assets, paying bills, bank accounts, etc. And personal would be anything that doesn't fall into those other two categories. So for example, let's say the mom has a caregiver and either she doesn't like her or the daughter feels that she's not doing a great job. The decision to change her and bring someone else in, for example, is a personal decision. Or let's say the family is all going away on a vacation to celebrate a simcha. The question of, is mom well enough to come along? Will it be good for her? Will it be too difficult or too confusing to change her environment? That's a personal decision, and that would fall into that category. Now, this document is really more than just a power of attorney. It's not just saying I'm appointing my daughter, my son, whoever to make decisions for me. It includes specific instructions that you would give them in advance. So you're not just telling them you decide for me, you're saying decide for me, but these are the things that I would like. For example, I really want to stay living in my home as much as possible, even if it means bringing in a caregiver to live with me. Okay, or for example, it could be how to invest your money. Okay, if you say invest it like this, high risk, low risk, different types of things, keep it in this currency or that currency. It can be also, let's say there's a parent who regularly helps out their divorced daughter with paying for the grandchildren's chugim. She would want to write that in her power of attorney, keep paying these amounts to my daughter to help for X, Y, and Z. That's just a few examples of what specific instructions might look like. It also allows you to create your own checks and balances system. What's nice about the enduring power of attorney is that you're releasing yourself from the supervision of ha'apotropos ha'klali, the administrator general, right? Because if you were a legal guardian, you would have to report annually to the apotropos klali, and that creates an extra burden on the agents, on whoever is taking care of their, let's say, aging parent. But you could create your own checks and balances system, first of all, by appointing different people and saying certain decisions have to be made jointly, or by appointing what we call an informed person, a person who doesn't actually have the authority to make decisions, but they have the right to receive information from the agents, including bank statements, medical records, all those different things. And that serves as a private built-in checks and balances system, and also allows involvement for some family members who maybe weren't actually appointed as agents. Another feature of the enduring power of attorney is that you choose how it's activated. What does that mean? Right? Everybody asks, okay, so let's say I sign this enduring power of attorney. What happens after I sign it? After you sign it, it's dormant. It's not usable yet at that point. It has to be submitted to, again, the apotropos klali, to the administrator general. They have a database of all these powers of attorney, and they're dormant. They're just lying there, waiting for the day, if ever needed, to be activated. Now, let's say that day comes. What's the mechanism? How do we know that that day comes? You choose that when you're writing your power of attorney. The default would be a specialist's opinion, a specialist being a neurologist, a psychiatrist, or a geriatrician, but you can change that default when you're creating the document. And you could say, I really trust my family doctor, or even it doesn't have to be a medical person. It could be a very close friend you want to choose who would make that decision for you. And you put into the power of attorney that they're the ones who decide. So you're effectively choosing the future mechanism of how it's going to be activated down the line. Another feature of the enduring power of attorney for the financial portion is that once it's activated, it stays valid for 90 days after the person passes away, allowing the agent to tie up different loose ends at that point.
Scenario 3, help. My mother is about to be hospitalized and she does not have a power of attorney. What can we do?
Okay, so this is a very real scenario. So ideally, right, we would have prepared in advance the enduring power of attorney that we talked about, right, which would cover medical and it would cover financial, and everybody would be all set and ready to go. But preparing those documents, it's not a quick in and out. You don't make a quick appointment and half an hour later, walk out of the lawyer's office with an enduring power of attorney. I myself, when I prepare them, I meet the client typically 3 times, if not more. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to work through, and it's a process. So what happens if we reach a situation where, in this case, right, mom needs to be hospitalized and, oh my gosh, we did not take care of this in advance. What do we do now? And it's too much for her to start thinking about the financial thing. We need to move forward. Now, I'm not talking about a scenario where she needs an urgent surgery. That would not require a power of attorney necessarily. I'm talking about, let's say she had scheduled some sort of surgery and then suddenly a week or so before, she gets really nervous and everybody's like, well, what's going to be if something goes wrong? We want to have a document ready. So the good news is there is a medical only power of attorney, which is effectively the same as the enduring power of attorney. It's the same, very similar form, okay, same concept, except that it applies only to medical. So what's the practical difference other than it not including personal and financial, is that in this document can actually be signed not only in front of a lawyer, but it can also be signed in front of a doctor, nurse, psychologist, or social worker. The enduring power of attorney, which was the previous scenario, that does require being signed in front of a lawyer. So here it's a standard form that you can get on the internet. And if you're in a bind and you don't have time to get to a lawyer and do the whole process, you could use this form, this medical only form, to get something signed. It's not ideal, but it's definitely better than nothing. Now, what's even better about this document, which is a new update due to COVID restrictions, what used to be was this. If someone signed this document, they had to go and deposit it within a year, but they had to deposit it physically, okay? That's to go in person to the Administrator General's office, which was quite a burden for someone who was in a condition that they had to sign a medical power of attorney. But they changed that recently, and now it's possible to submit it online. Anybody can do it through the GovID system, and that makes things much easier. So I would say if you can't do the full enduring power of attorney, at least do this medical only power of attorney.
Scenario 4, my father feels very strongly that if he is near death, he does not want any treatments or procedures that would only prolong his life rather than make it better. How can we make sure that his wishes will be respected?
Okay, so interestingly, whenever someone calls me about an enduring power of attorney, this is the first thing that they go to. They just jump right to the end and they say, I don't want to be hooked up to a machine. I don't want to be a vegetable. I don't want this. I don't want that. Where do I put that down? And then I always have to sort of clarify that actually the enduring power of attorney that we talked about is not meant for end-of-life decisions. So what do we do, or what can we do about end-of-life decisions? There's a specific law, okay? In Hebrew, it's chok hachole hanute lamut. In English, that translates as the terminally ill patient law. And that is the law that determines end-of-life decisions. Now, I want to start with the basis that a person has a right, a basic right to refuse medical treatment. So as long as you can knowingly make the decision that, no, I do not want to be treated for ABC, you won't be treated for ABC. The question is, what happens if someone does not have the cognitive competence to make that choice? Can someone make the choice for them? And the question is yes, provided that they sign the documents in advance. So what do we have? What are our options in such a case? So first of all, the law again talks about terminally ill patients, which is defined as someone who is determined to have no more than 6 months left to live, regardless of treatment. And the other limitation, which is a very strong one, of the law is that there's no active hastening of death allowed in Israel, okay? There's no pulling plugs here. There is only passive refraining from hooking up, etc. So what are our options? The first option is to sign a power of attorney. This is also a standard form. It can be found online. And what this power of attorney is saying is this. It's saying, if I become a terminally ill patient and I cannot make my own decisions, then I'm appointing ABC to make that decision for me. I'm giving them the power to say on my behalf, don't hook me up, don't artificially keep me alive, okay? That's one type of document. Like I said, it could be found online. It has to be signed in front of 2 witnesses. And I always recommend submitting it to the health ministry. They have a specific department that deals with this, and they have a database of these documents. Another type of document which allows you to express your wishes in advance is what's called advance directives. This is more specific. You're saying, if I reach that situation where I'm terminally ill, can't make my own decisions, I'm telling you now what my decision would be. That form is longer, and it includes a whole list of different types of treatments, and you have to check the box if you want to refrain from that treatment or you don't want to refrain from that treatment. It includes a lot of difficult situations like dialysis, amputations, all kinds of treatments. And that first, before you can sign it, you have to go and sit with a doctor or nurse. It's part of the form, it's part of the requirements, because they have to explain to you what all those different things mean and what it would mean to refrain from certain treatments. So once you go and you sit with a nurse or a doctor, they sign on a document that they explained it to you, and then you can sign the document once again in front of two witnesses. The third option here is a combination of those two documents. So you can say, here are my wishes, but I'm also appointing ABC to make this decision for me. And if you do both, you have to choose which one would override the other, okay? Because you don't want to create a clash. That's as far as end of life decisions go. Now, this table is just to help us quickly go through what we talked about here. So we talked about the general notarized power of attorney, right? We said it does not apply to medical issues. It only applies to financial. We said it's good for 10 years or until loss of cognitive skills. Then we talked about the enduring power of attorney, right? Which only kicks in upon loss of cognitive skills and then would stay valid as long as that reality or situation exists. It can cover medical and financial. But within this category, we also talked about the subcategory of just the medical power of attorney, which is a type of enduring power of attorney. It has the same characteristics as an enduring power of attorney. It's just limited to medical. We said it's a little bit more accessible because you don't have to sign it in front of a lawyer. There are other professionals who can sign it in front of. And that now can be submitted online. And we talked about the end of life power of attorney, which is only medical, not financial. Now, it's good for 5 years, but it's easy to renew. The health ministry sends you a reminder every 5 years. And even if you forgot to sign it, to renew it, it still stays in their database and it's not like it disappears completely. And of course, that only is relevant when you can't make your own decision. So that's a general summary of these different powers of attorney. And I want to talk a little bit about how these work now during Corona restrictions, lockdown, all these different options. The notarized power of attorney, unfortunately, nothing really changed. Fortunately or not fortunately, there are very strict rules and guidelines for notaries. It cannot be signed remotely. The notary would have to meet someone in person in order to confirm their signature. The good news is that notaries can come to you. So if you're afraid to go out and you don't want to go to their office, they can come to wherever you are. As far as enduring powers of attorney, here too, there is a requirement that everybody sign in front of the lawyer, both the person preparing the power of attorney and the agents, the people that he or her are appointing. However, they did make an allowance that anybody who is over 65 or is at risk due to a medical condition can sign by video conference with the lawyer. There are certain restrictions there too, but I'm not going to get into that. It's just important to know that that option does exist. The end of life power of attorney, we said must be signed in front of two witnesses. That does have to be done in person, but you can usually do that. The witnesses can be anybody who isn't the agents that you're appointing, right? So it could be a neighbor or whoever is nearby taking care of you, as long as they're not the person you're appointing, and you can do so from a pretty safe distance. So I feel that that is a fairly doable option. And lastly, as we said, the medical only power of attorney, once again, has to be signed in front of a professional, but it can be submitted online. So those are the solutions that are available today with different allowances made available. Here are some resources. I believe we can send these out to the participants, right, Sharon?
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards.
Okay. Here, the first one is just some basic legal terms because I threw out a whole bunch of different things here, and it may have been a lot to take in. So you can download this sheet of terms, and it can help you sort of just make things clear in your head and help you remind you what we talked about. Here's a great article by Belef Shalom about planning for aging and planning ahead. Kol Zchut is an excellent portal. It's mostly in Hebrew, but if you know Hebrew and understand Hebrew, there's a lot of information there. I think this link might actually be in English. The Ministry of Health forms, those are the terminally ill patient forms that we discussed. And the bottom link is how to deposit a medical power of attorney. It'll walk you through the steps. That was a very quick and very general overview. I hope I wasn't talking too quickly. Here's information for if you have a specific situation you want to discuss, if you want to get any further advice. And I believe that at this point, we can open it up for questions. So Sharon, I'm handing it over to you.
Yeah, we have questions coming in. For those of you who haven't discovered it yet, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you can just type in your questions. It's anonymous. I actually gonna sort of highlight two things before I launch into participant questions. One is, and these are really based on things that as care managers, we come across from a very practical perspective. One is on the enduring power of attorney, what's known as activating it. This is something that I see asked. We monitor moderate, a group, a Facebook group called Sandwich Generation Israel. And one of the questions that comes up there quite a bit is, okay, we have this enduring power of attorney. My parents spent a whole lot of time putting it all together. We have a letter from our doctor saying that it now needs to be activated, but how do we actually activate it? What do I now need in my hand to go to the doctor or to go to the bank?
Okay, so yes, that comes up a lot. I do see that. So the first thing is not just, you have to see what are the list of requirements that you need to activate it, and you have to check that in the power of attorney itself, right? So we said that you choose the activation mechanism. Let's assume it's a letter from a doctor and we have that. But there could be other requirements as well, such as before you activate this, inform so-and-so. So you have to see if that appears in that in the power of attorney and fulfill that obligation as well. Then there's another form that the activator, meaning the agent, right? Because you're the one, if you were appointed as an agent, you would be the one taking the steps to activate it. There's a form that you have to fill out, sign it, and scan it. Once you gather all of those things, then you can sign in online through the website. It's legal capacity, I think Gov.il, I have to check it, but it's, if you have to Google Hafalati Prikoch Mitmashech. I can probably send a link afterwards, and you follow the steps there. There's a place to sign in, okay? And it would require you to sign in through the GovID system, and then you would be able to submit those documents. You send it in, it reaches the Administrator General, but it's not automated, meaning it's not like, oh, I submit it, I get an automatic letter back saying, boom, it's activated. You have to wait because they review it too, okay? The Administrator General will look and make sure you did actually fulfill the requirements that are listed in the enduring power of attorney, and then they would send a letter back. So it's best not to wait till the absolute last second where it's super urgent. Obviously, you don't want to activate it prematurely, but don't wait and don't expect that the second you send everything in, you get back the letter of confirmation.
Is there anything you can do if maybe you didn't necessarily wait, but there was some kind of crisis? That you had to have really instant power?
Let's say a medical crisis?
Yeah.
Okay,
and you didn't have a medical power of attorney.
Sorry?
And you hadn't filed you didn't complete a medical power of attorney. You really just needed that one.
Okay, but you're saying in a situation where you have the enduring one?
Right. I have an enduring one, and there's a crisis, delirium and
it's not activated.
Not activated, but I really need to be able to make decisions now.
Okay, so the first thing I would try, if we're talking about a medical decision, is I would try to present the document as is to the doctors. Now, it may work, it may not. There's no guarantee, but that's where I would start. And the other thing I would do is contact the Apotropos Klali, activate it as quickly as you can, and contact them and say, this is urgent. Okay, there are human beings there, okay, and they could be reached. And when it's a real, true emergency, then they will fast track your request.
Great. Okay, I'm going to get to a couple of these questions, and if we don't get to everything, you have both of our email addresses in front of you, so you can always write to us separately. But I kind of, the big questions that were asked here tonight, and which again in our group are asked quite a bit, most of them actually have to do with families that are on two sides of the ocean. You know, how are we going to manage that? So one of the questions was, can a person, a child or a sibling or somebody outside of Israel be appointed to act as a proxy here in Israel if the need arises?
Right, I do see that come up a lot. The answer is yes, okay, but it's yes, but. Number one, whoever, as we said, every agent has to sign the document in front of the lawyer, an Israeli lawyer as well. So if you're appointing an agent who is abroad, we would have to find an Israeli licensed lawyer in their area, and they would sign in front of them and then send the documents back here. So far, in most cases, we were able to do that. Somehow Israeli lawyers find themselves everywhere. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I would not leave that as the sole appointment, meaning I wouldn't just appoint someone who is abroad and that's it. It's important to have boots on the ground. It's important to have someone who's here in real time, can make decisions real time, can walk into the bank if needed, speak to the doctors face to face. So if we're talking about a situation where there are, say, 2 siblings in Israel and the third is abroad, then no problem, they have family here. They could appoint the child who's abroad as well, as long as we find an Israeli lawyer nearby. If not, then the easier solution is to appoint them as an informed person, right? So they're not actually making decisions, but there's someone involved, and that does not require them signing on the document. But let's talk about a situation where you don't have immediate family here. The natural people who you would appoint as an agent are in Chutz La'aretz. So in such a case, you could appoint them, but you can get help from someone in Israel. So if we would add, maybe appoint a close trusted friend, but you would say, you know what, I really don't want to have to burden my friend with taking care of me at such an intense level. I have to say that that's exactly where B'lev Shalem comes in handy, because, or, you know, services like that, because B'lev Shalem could come in and take care of all the day-to-day of hiring a caregiver, of taking the person to the doctor, of stocking the fridge, whatever needs to be done, they'll do. And then either a close trusted friend or a professional like a lawyer or someone else could be hired as the official agent to oversee things. So there are solutions when the family is abroad.
Thank you. Thank you for the hats off too. So there was, you know, we have, I'm sure, a lot of Olim on this webinar. Mm-hmm. And as I personally have been asked the question many times of people who are moving here and they've already done all of this. They have a will, they have a power of attorney. Do they have to redo everything when they come here?
Okay, so I'm going to touch upon wills real quick, even though it's not really the topic of today's webinar. Just because you moved doesn't mean your will is no longer valid. Okay, whatever will you prepared abroad is probably valid here. The question is it the best option for here? Is it ideal? So, because often, depending where you come from, you may have a very complex plan in your will, which isn't suitable or necessary for Israel. And then you're sort of creating more work rather than just making a simpler will for Israel. So probably valid, but probably also worth looking at. That's as far as the will goes. As far as powers of attorney, the general wisdom is that it's best to have a power of attorney specific to whatever jurisdiction you're in. So if you're coming to Israel, you're making aliyah, the easiest and most straightforward thing to do would be prepare the Israeli enduring power of attorney. That being said, let's say we're in a situation where it's too late, okay? Someone made aliyah, they had a power of attorney from Chutz La'aretz, but at this point they're too far gone and they can no longer sign on the Israeli version. All hope is not lost. There was a case recently where the court recognized the U.S. power of attorney was from Florida, and they allowed it to be activated here. Now, again, that's not ideal because you don't want to have to go to court and have to go through that whole thing of getting the opinion from the administrator general approving it. So it's not an ideal situation, but it could be a decent backup plan if it's too late. My recommendation would be, if you're coming here and you're still able to sign the documents, prepare the Israeli ones.
And since we're on Olim, how are we managing language? I mean, can all this be done in English? Do you have people who don't speak Hebrew signing a document in Hebrew? How does that work?
Yes. Okay. So here's the difficulty, specifically when it comes to the powers of attorney, the enduring power of attorney. It's an online system that lawyers can access, and it's only in Hebrew. I wish it were offered in other languages, at least in English. Right now, it's not. But let's say someone comes to me and they really don't speak Hebrew. So what do we do? First of all, I have the blank form. I have an English version of it so they could see what it looks like. And really, the heart and soul of the document is those advanced directives that we talked about, right? The instructions you're leaving to your agents. So when someone does not speak a word of Hebrew, I would have those drafted first in English to make sure The person can read them. He's happy with them. Once we finalize that, then I have it translated into Hebrew, and it's input into the power of attorney in Hebrew, and the English version is just attached to the power of attorney.
Okay. We have a couple more questions, but I did promise to stay under the half an hour mark. So I'm gonna really, offer to people, whether you have questions about care management or anything that you saw today or any other legal related questions, all of our contact information is in front of you. And if you accidentally get to one of us by mistake, we'll send you to the other one. All of this also, for those of you I saw who came in late or who had to leave early, will be posted on our Facebook pages by tomorrow, hopefully. And that's really it. I wanted to thank you, Miriam. I have done this presentation with you several times, and I feel like every time I listen to it, it sits a little bit better. It is a lot of information, but it's so important and so necessary. And like I said, we, as care managers with feet on the ground and in people's homes and in the hospitals and in the doctor's offices, I just can't stress enough how important it is to have these things in place. It is the difference of crisis or not crisis. And, when things do happen and they happen fast, it's really the difference. Having all this in place is just phenomenal, both for the people who need the support, but also for the people having to make decisions for the people they love. So, so thanks again. And
absolutely, I agree. I just would say, as you said, when crisis hits, the last thing you want to be doing is dealing with extra bureaucracy, because you need all of your energy for being there for each other and for yourself. So I'm really glad for whoever joined us today. It's so important to educate yourself, to know what your options are, and to take those steps, even when it's not necessarily fun things to think about. Best to be prepared for these things. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everybody.